Good afternoon if you are an East Coaster, as we are, and you know, whatever time of day it might be. Welcome everybody to our first virtual National Mall program for the new school year. We're excited to be back, and Ranger Bethany's been working on her graphics, and she's got an exciting new program for you here. Our focus today is on the Jefferson Memorial, and we're excited to be with you. As always, thanks to our friends from the Trust for the National Mall, who have some big, exciting news to share at the end of this program as well. So they work with us on these programs, and they have something new and exciting we're going to show you at the end. So stick around if you can. And if you have a moment, throw your school name or your grade or where you're joining us from, so we know who's out there. And we hope you're willing to participate. We've got a little game for you to play today as we learn about the Jefferson Memorial. So I will stop talking and I will pass it to Ranger Bethany. Oh, Mrs. Peterson is here with her second graders in Wisconsin. Yay!
All right, everybody, we are ready to go. So yeah, again, as Jen said, welcome to it's our first program, of the new school year. And we're kind of focusing here on a topic that is sort of related to what's going to happen next year, which is a big word, the semi-quincentennial, which of course is the country's 250th birthday next year. So we decided to maybe throw a little game about the Jefferson Memorial and what does it take to sort of build the Jefferson Memorial. And so the decision was made in the 1930s that, you know what, we have this great big monument to George Washington and to all of his efforts during the American Revolution as general. And we've got this big memorial to Abraham Lincoln, who was our 16th president. But we really don't have anything in Washington, D.C. that honors our third president and the person who wrote the Declaration of Independence, which was that document that basically told the world why the United States wanted to be its own independent nation. And so the decision was made to, well, let's build a Jefferson Memorial. And once they got permission to do that, there were a couple of steps that needed to happen in order to make this memorial sort of reality, to see it get built. So what we're going to do today is we are going to follow these steps and see what it took to get the Jefferson Memorial built. All right, so we're going to start with the first step, one of the most important steps after you get permission to build a memorial. The first thing you have to decide is, what is it going to look like? So we are going to choose a design for the Jefferson Memorial. And to some degree, Thomas Jefferson made it a little bit easy because he was an architect. And so he liked to design buildings. And most of his buildings contained the exact same type of roof. And so when they decided to build the Jefferson Memorial, they kind of went back and sort of looked at some of the things that Jefferson designed and thought, well, maybe we should use some of these elements in building his memorial. But to do that, we do have a question for you. What type of roof did Jefferson like to use on buildings he designed? Do you think it was a pyramid? Do you think it was a dome? Or do you think it was a flat roof? So 1, 2, or 3, if you want to put that in the chat box, you can. What type of roof did Jefferson like to put on buildings he designed? So pyramid, dome, or flat?
Okay, we've got a number 2 in the chat box.
Okay. Any other guesses?
People must be thinking hard. Oh, another 2.
Another 2. Yeah, the memorial kind of gives it away a little bit, doesn't it? If you've ever seen the Jefferson Memorial, it does have on top a dome. And so Jefferson liked to put domes on buildings. This is his home, Monticello. This is in Virginia. And if you sort of take a look at the top here, you kind of have a little bitty mini sort of dome going on there. And then Jefferson also thought that education and going to school was very important. He especially loved to read. And so he created a school, a university called the University of Virginia. And one of the first buildings there at that university is called the Rotunda. And what does it have on it? Of course, it's a dome. And so when they decided that they're going to build this memorial to Thomas Jefferson, they thought certainly should have a dome on it. And you can see that there's also those columns that Jefferson liked to use a lot in the buildings that he designed. So yes, so our first job whenever we get permission to build a memorial is to try and figure out what it's supposed to look like. All right, so once we have that out of the way, the next important job in the memorial process is going to be choosing a location. So where are you going to put the Thomas Jefferson Memorial? And there were a couple of different locations that they thought about. Maybe it should go behind the White House. So it should face the White House, or maybe it should be back behind the Capitol building. But the people that were helping to build the memorial thought, you know what? It actually needs to be in view of some of the most important buildings that we have, not only in Washington, D.C., but also on the National Mall. And so if we look at our map here, we see that this is the Thomas Jefferson Memorial down near what we call the tidal basin. And if we sort of look at that view there, it gives us a beautiful view, not only of George Washington's monument, but if you look just to the left there, you can see the White House. And so the builders of the memorial wanted to make sure that you could see other important monuments, memorials, and buildings. And one of the things you may notice is if you look along the water's edge here, you see all these trees on both sides. And then here you don't see any trees. And those trees were taken down so that the president at the time, and we'll talk about him a bit later, his name was Roosevelt. He really liked Jefferson and he wanted to be able to see the memorial. And so he asked for those trees to be removed so we have that direct line of sight between the White House and the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. The problem was with this location, there was already something there, something pretty important to the city of Washington, something that people already considered to be sort of the main focus of the tidal basin. And if you put a memorial there, that maybe it would take away the importance of what was already on the water's edge. So our next question for you in our trivia round is, what had to be taken down, do you think, to build the Jefferson Memorial? So what was already in that location? Was it a beach where Washingtonians went to swim? Was it a restroom? Or was it the cherry trees? So what do you think? 1, 2, or 3? A beach, a restroom, or the famous Japanese flowering cherry trees?
I see a 2. I don't know if that's this round or last round. I'm confused now.
Okay.
I see a 3.
Okay.
It's warm here today. I could go for a beach. I should also mention that if at any time you have any questions, please feel free to put those in the chat as well, and we will try and get those answered as quick as we can.
Yeah, so let's see what answers. Let's see what had to be removed. It was in fact the Japanese flowering cherry trees. Interestingly enough, there used to be a beach where the Thomas Jefferson Memorial is now located, but that beach had been closed before they decided to put the memorial there. But there were cherry trees, and these were a gift from Japan. First time in 1910, and those trees were a little bit diseased and infested with insects, so they had to sort of destroy them. And then in 1912, Japan gave a new gift of trees, and those were planted around the tidal basin. And there was a lot of concern that if you put this memorial there, what's going to happen to these trees? And there was a little confusion about how many trees were going to be torn down. And this caused people to be a little concerned. You can see, if you've never been here for the Cherry Blossom Festival, you can see these beautiful trees that sort of sit along the water's edge. Um, it looks like they are already in bloom here. So they're kind of a white, light pink looking tree, a beautiful tree that only blooms once a year. But because of all the confusion about how many trees were going to be removed, in fact, one newspaper said 700 cherry blossoms would have to be chopped down. There was a group of women who lived in Washington who loved the cherry blossoms, who decided that they were going to come down to the work site one day and they were going to do a little bit of a protest, kind of mess up the construction area in order to try and try and essentially save the cherry trees. And so what they do is, you can see here that they sort of symbolically chain themselves to the trees to make sure that they wouldn't be chopped down. Now, there are a couple of different stories as to how this whole sort of protest ended. And one of the stories say that, what are they wearing? They're wearing fur coats, right? So it's pretty chilly out. And so the workmen decide to offer them some coffee. And if you drink enough coffee, it's kind of like water. Eventually, you're going to have to use the bathroom. And so after giving them all this coffee, they sort of unchained themselves to go find a restroom. And in that moment, they decided to take down some of the trees. Now, we don't know if that's exactly how the story goes. Ultimately, what's going to happen is that this is going to be a familiar name in this story. President Roosevelt, who removed the tree so that he could see the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. President Roosevelt promised that for every tree that had been chopped down or taken down, he would plant 2 more around the tidal basin. And so that kind of calmed things down. And instead of more cherry blossom rebellions, which is what this was called, people sort of got the idea that maybe it's okay that we put the Jefferson Memorial here, as long as we still have cherry blossoms that are going to sit around the water's edge. And today, this has become a beautiful place to go check out those cherry trees. So it's a very popular place to come out in springtime. You get some great shots of both the memorial as well as the cherry trees there. Okay, so we have a design, right? And we have a location, but we're not done yet, because there's another big decision that you have to make when you decide to build a memorial. And that decision is going to be what building materials they're supposed to use. Now, we do know that the Jefferson Memorial, of course, was not made of Legos, but there are a number of different things that you can build a memorial out of. Here in Washington, here on the National Mall, we use a lot of stone. Sometimes it's granite, or sometimes it's marble, which is what Jefferson ultimately will be made out of. But not all of the Jefferson Memorial is stone. There's one very important part. It's actually metal. And it's a metal called bronze. And that is our statue of Thomas Jefferson. And I'll talk a little bit more about our statue when we take a virtual tour of the Thomas Jefferson Memorial in just a few minutes. But our metal statue wasn't original. It was it was the statue that came in after the memorial had already been built. And instead of having the metal one, they made a plaster statue. So when you think of plaster, if you know anyone who's ever broken an arm or a leg and had to have like a cast put on your arm and your leg, those are usually made of plaster. Well, our statue was made of that exact same material. And then they painted it a bronze color. So it pretty much looked exactly like the one that we have in the memorial today. And I like this picture when they're kind of taking it apart, because you can see just how big the statue is compared to the worker who is trying to take off the top parts of our first plaster statue. So the question that we have for you is, why didn't they just make the statue out of metal to begin with? Why did they need to make a plaster statue first? And so do you think it was because it would cost too much? Was it too expensive? Was it because there was a big war happening and they needed materials to go towards the war, and that war was World War II? Or do you think it was because they wanted the statue to be made of marble instead of metal? So what do you think? One, two, or three? Too expensive, war, or they wanted to be made of some other kind of material?
We've got some twos.
Twos.
And a question for you when you have a moment.
Yeah. Let's check out the answer first. Ready? Yeah, so it was World War II. So the Thomas Jefferson Memorial is going to be built or finished as this war is going on all around the world. And the builders of the memorial really couldn't think of a good reason why they should use metal to build a statue when it needed to go towards helping with the war effort. And so they had to hold off a little bit. And that's why they made that plaster statue first, and then they would bring the metal statue in after the war had already ended. All right, Jen, what's our question?
Um, how do people and events get selected to be memorialized within the mall?
That is a really, really good question. So there are a couple of different ways. So let's take the Lincoln Memorial for example. The Lincoln Memorial was part of a big beautification effort in Washington, D.C. It was part of what was called the Macmillan Plan. And this was a group of people who wanted to sort of clean up not only the National Mall, but the city. And they included a Lincoln Memorial in that. Other memorials are built by societies. So the Washington Monument, there was a group of people living in Washington who decided, you know what, we need this big tall monument to George Washington. So they came together and got permission to build it. And then in other circumstances, like the Jefferson Memorial, there were members of Congress who thought for quite a while that there should be a Jefferson Memorial on the mall. So a specific member of Congress, he was from New York. He loved Thomas Jefferson, and he decided to sort of get permission to build Jefferson there. So there's a couple of different ways. Usually, what happens is it's a group that comes together that decides that we need to build a memorial, and they go to Congress and ask permission for that to happen.
But it's not the mall or organizations on the mall. It's way above us. And
Right, yeah.
usually
National Park Service, we don't decide what
we
gets
don't
built
do
on
any
the
of
National
that.
Mall. No.
And we don't usually have much of a say in any kind of
Mhm.
design. It's pretty much handed to us after it's finished.
Yes. Yeah. And when we kind of think about that too, we weren't even around when the Washington Monument, Jefferson Memorial, and Lincoln Memorial were built. The National Park Service doesn't come in till a little bit later. I guess we were kind of around during Jefferson. Yeah, we were around a little bit for that, but we really don't have much say, yeah, in what or where things get built.
But I mean, Bethany and I have been around a long time, and we've been here
Yeah.
to see a couple memorials built, and they happen around us. And, we get to take care of them and interpret them, but we don't have
Mm-mm.
a say in other aspects of it. Cool. Let's go.
All right. So I have a bonus question for everybody. So we know that the statue of the Thomas Jefferson Memorial came in second, right? So the memorial was already built, and now you have to get this 5-ton, 19-foot tall statue of Thomas Jefferson somehow into the memorial when it's already been fixed. So my question to you is, how did they do it? And when you're thinking about how much does, how much would 5 tons weigh? Think of trying to pick up an elephant, which is pretty heavy. So how did we get this statue of Thomas Jefferson in this already finished memorial? What do we think? I have some suggestions, but I was wondering if anybody had an answer.
I got some wheels on the bottom and took the wheels off.
I was trying to
Interesting.
reel him in.
Yeah, wheel them in. Could they have
Okay.
built it in there?
Okay, yep, sort of like kind of like they did the Lincoln statue, right? They had 28 separate pieces of marble and they brought them inside the chamber and sort of put them together. It's a little harder to do when you have a metal statue. What do we
Good
think?
thinking. Built it in parts. Underground. Oh, I don't know that I've ever thought of an underground, like
I was sort of bringing from the bottom up.
bottom. I know, that's kind
That's
of fun.
interesting. I kind of like that answer.
Yeah.
So there's some creative ways of getting Jefferson inside his memorial.
Yep.
Yeah. So sometimes one of the answers that we get is they just kind of see the round dome, just kind of pop the dome off and lower him from the top. Yeah, but again, never really thought about bringing him in from the basement. So how do we get the statue inside? Well, you all had really good suggestions. Essentially what they decided to do was simply try and pull it through the columns. And they didn't have a whole lot of room to play with, especially with the pedestal, the bottom part of the statue, which was much wider than Jefferson himself. And they had to kind of get creative in how they got him up there too. So somebody said maybe wheels on the bottom. Well, what they decided to do was take some railroad tracks and lay them against the outside of the Jefferson Memorial and then sort of use this pulley system where a bunch of workers would simply start pulling Thomas Jefferson inside. And it did take a while to get him all the way through the columns there. This is a really good picture of it. The next one here, you can see just how much room they had to play. It looks like they're kind of out of room over here and have a little bit of room to get Jefferson inside the memorial there on the side. And again, remember, he weighs almost as much as an elephant. So it is a really, really heavy statue. And then they're just using pulleys and weights and ropes to stand Thomas Jefferson up to where he's been standing ever since. Yeah, so here's how we got our statue inside the Jefferson Memorial. Okay, so one more quick step before we take a virtual tour and before we talk about kind of an exciting opportunity that we have for you all to learn a little bit more, not only about the Jefferson Memorial, but other things that we have here on the National Mall. Our fourth step is kind of the fun part. So once we've chosen the design, location, once we've figured out what we're building it out of, and once we've finished building the memorial, now comes the part where we decide to dedicate it and then open it to the public. And when you think about a dedication, kind of think of some of the things that you think might be important to have at these ceremonies when we are opening the memorial. And a lot of times what we have is we have things such as music. We have a lot of guest speakers come out, and it's kind of an interesting occasion. Ranger Jen, what we've seen three maybe new memorials be dedicated since you and I started here.
Yeah.
I think it's three, yeah, and all of them are a little bit different. But here at the Thomas
One was
Jefferson,
in the rain.
yeah, one of them was in the rain. Um, Here at the Jefferson Memorial dedication, they decided that they needed to bring a special document and to have it available for people to see at the Jefferson Memorial for a little bit of time. And this was kind of a big deal because remember I said that this memorial was essentially it had been built during the wartime, right? So it's finished in 1943 and the war hadn't ended quite yet. And so a lot of the important documents, in fact, all three of the documents that you see on the screen there, had kind of been hidden away in a secret location because they were afraid that perhaps if the United States was invaded, that maybe these documents could be taken. And so they hid them, but they felt it was important enough that when the Jefferson Memorial was open, that they have one of these documents there on display. So which one do you think it was? Do you think it was the US Constitution? Do you think it was the Bill of Rights? Or do you think it was the Declaration of Independence? So one, two, or three. The document that kind of forms our government, the Constitution. The Bill of Rights, which lays out rights that we have, or the Declaration of Independence. What I always like to say is a great breakup letter. We decided we were going to break up from England, Great Britain, and be our own country.
We have a number 3 who even justified their answer by saying because Thomas Jefferson wrote it, and he was a
Yes.
founding father.
Yes, yeah, that's a really good answer. I think that would be a great reason to bring the Declaration of Independence and have it on display while they are dedicating the Jefferson Memorial. And at the time they brought it out, it was in this great big metal box. And you can see just how many Marines it took to even pick this up. I always kind of feel bad for this guy right here who
Since
seems
you
to
pointed that out to me, now I just have to laugh every time I see that poor guy.
that seems to be pretty heavy to sort of pick up this document and to have it on display inside the Jefferson Memorial. But how cool would it have been to see the document that he wrote at his memorial? It's not there anymore. It was just out for this occasion. It's still in Washington, D.C. It was brought back just before the war came to an end, and now it sits in an important building called the National Archives. So this is where you can see all of what we call our founding documents. All right. And of course, you can't have a dedication without the president that really was kind of important in getting this memorial built. President Roosevelt loved Thomas Jefferson. And when he came to Washington, D.C., before he was even president, he made a comment that he was surprised that there wasn't anything here that honored the third president. And so when Roosevelt gets elected, he works with members of Congress to build a Jefferson Memorial. And not only that, he helps create some of the designs and chooses some of the words that will be written there that we'll see in just a minute on our virtual tour. So here you can see President Roosevelt giving his dedication speech. And again, if you look just behind him, you can see a really good view of the White House. And it is this guy right here, President Roosevelt, that had all of those trees removed so that we can see. And does anybody know who this is? Can't leave this picture until we mention
I know,
this
I just
person's
noticed
name.
that she was there.
Yeah, does anybody know who this is? Anybody want to take a guess? Because President Roosevelt has a memorial on the National Mall as well. And this person happens to be inside his memorial. So there's a statue of her there today. Who would you guess?
It won't mean anything to anybody, but I just went and visited her house, which is also a national park site, last weekend. Stumped?
Yeah, I think maybe we're stumped. So this is Eleanor Roosevelt. So this is President Roosevelt's wife. So she was first lady at the time, who was very important. And so whoops, she gets a very central a part of FDR's memorial, which is just across from the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. If you've ever been to the National Mall, you can actually see it from there. Okay, so I am going to stop sharing and we are going to go on a very quick virtual tour and we are going to see some of the things that we talked about when we visit our Jefferson Memorial. So I'm going to let my friend Bobby drive the virtual tour. All right, so here is our view. This picture was actually taken, you can kind of see along the tidal basin there. This was taken during the Cherry Blossom Festival, so you can see all those blossoms that are bloomed over around the water. And again, in that view, you can see there's the tall Washington Monument there, which is a great view from the Jefferson Memorial. There we go. That's actually a pretty good picture. You can see really the color change pretty well there in that image. All right, so if we kind of pan around to the memorial there, we are going to start from the outside and we are going to go inside. So we're going to start with a picture that's kind of on the outside, the top of the outside of the memorial. And it might be a little bit difficult to see, but if you look closely there, you might see a bunch of people sort of standing and sitting around a table. And I bet if you were to guess who the person who's standing is, you would probably think that that would be Thomas Jefferson, and you are correct. This is called the Committee of Five. So we often give credit to Thomas Jefferson for writing the Declaration of Independence, and he definitely was important. He wrote the vast majority of it, but there were four other people that were part of a team that were given the assignment to draft this document to tell the world why we wanted to be an independent nation. And so the other four that we have up there, two of them you may have heard of, and two of them you probably haven't. So the two that you've probably heard of, the first is Ranger Jen's absolute favorite president of all times, John Adams, who becomes our second president. And the other person is Benjamin Franklin, who you've probably heard of as well. And then the other two who are on this side are two guys who were very important in getting some of our documents created. They were Roger Sherman and Robert Livingston. And again, all five of them were given that assignment to write this Declaration of Independence, with Thomas Jefferson sort of being team leader of that effort. All right, so if we come down a little bit, we're going to go inside the memorial. And we're going to check out that 5-ton, 19-foot tall bronze statue of Thomas Jefferson. There we go. Certainly facing out towards the White House. If we were inside and we turn around, we could see the White House. It's a little hard from our view here, but there's two things that I want to ask you about on our statue to see if you can figure out. First thing is, you might notice that he's holding something in his hand. If you were to take a guess as to what he might be holding, what do you think? What do you think is written on that piece of paper that's rolled up in his hand?
Perhaps the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah, that would be a really good guess. I mean, that's what we would think it is. Unfortunately, Ranger Jen and I can't tell you what's written on that piece of paper because the artist who made our statue never tells us. And one of the reasons he doesn't tell us is because Thomas Jefferson wrote a lot of things. And he wanted anyone who walks into the memorial to be able to think of all of those things. So maybe it's the Declaration, maybe it's the Constitution, maybe it's a map. One thing we know about Jefferson is he sent people out to explore the country. Some of them, two of them were named Lewis and Clark. So maybe it's a map that they had sent back to him. And so really it could be anything, but I would say that most people say it's the Declaration of Independence in his hand. And then if we pan down just really quickly a little bit, most of the time our memorials, they like to honor sort of the person's efforts while they were president or while they were a military figure. But at the Thomas Jefferson Memorial, we also have something that sort of highlights something that was kind of personal to Jefferson. It really didn't have a lot to do necessarily with his presidency. Can anyone see what might be sort of carved in to the bottom of the Jefferson statue? I know it's probably a little bit hard with our virtual tour here, but can anybody see? And what if I gave you a hint? What if I said it had something to do with farming? Does that help at all? Yeah, it definitely is. An animal is not a bad guess. That would be kind of cool. At one point, I think there was some word going around that maybe there was a chicken engraved on the back of the statue, although I don't know that I ever saw the chicken. It's a really, really good guess. If we think of a farm and we don't think of animals, what else might we think of? What else might be on a farm? Something that we might grow that I bet a lot of you have eaten. Sometimes you can also pop it,
Ooh,
and that's pretty good. Corn, yeah. So we've
nice.
got We've got corn kind of engraved in there. And that is there to remind us that Thomas Jefferson owned a farm. And one of the things that he planted there was definitely corn. And then the other thing that I wanted to show you here in our Jefferson Memorial, and you can kind of see a little bit of the dome there. We talked about how Thomas Jefferson liked to use that on all of his buildings. We have a lot of his words because Jefferson liked to write a lot. I think it's been said that he wrote over 20,000 letters, which I don't think I'm even close to writing even a third of that. But all of the inscriptions that we have on the panels there are important words. And one of them is, of course, the Declaration of Independence, because you can't not put that in the Thomas Jefferson Memorial. And this is one that President Roosevelt had a lot to say. He thought that a specific section of the Declaration should be written there. And so they kind of took his advice. And we have the part that I think most people sort of remember. And there's a very important phrase within this part of the Declaration of Independence that we kind of see as a big theme that we have on the National Mall, and this idea that all men are created equal. And so you can see that there written on the Declaration of Independence. So one of the things that we wanted to show you is that this virtual tour is part of an exciting new opportunity for you called the National Mall Gateway. And it was created by our friends at the Trust for the National Mall. And there are all kinds of features for you to explore and to learn about all of the interesting places that we have here in the park. So I'm gonna let Bobby, our virtual tour driver, speak just a little bit on there to give you just a little bit of a better idea of some of the things that you can discover on the National Mall Gateway. So Bobby?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Bobby Caith. I'm the product manager for the National Mall Gateway, which is a product that we've been working on with the Trust for the National Mall and the National Park Service. We're very grateful to Ranger Bethany and Ranger Jen for both their ideas on content and all their ideas to help us create this site for teachers and students to use in their classrooms, but also the virtual tours. The virtual tours, we were shooting these at 5 a.m. in the morning, and Ranger Bethany and I and Ranger Jen and I were hanging out at 5 a.m. In the dawn together as we shot these tours. So thank you so much for all the work that you do for the Gateway and for all the work that you do in general. Yeah, so this is our National Mall Gateway. We're so excited for students and for teachers to get to use this soon. We're going to put the chat in a moment so you can click around yourself. You can continue this lesson by clicking on a site card. I'll get to that. Or you can learn about all these other memorials. So when you click on one of these site cards, you click on the Jefferson Memorial, and it starts with a couple different things. You see some photography of it to click around and get to see the memorial. There's ways. Here is, if you come to the site, there's where the bathrooms are, all that sort of information that you're going to need to know. Then we have a little explainer on who Jefferson was and the memorial itself, all of which now you are experts on because you attended this webinar. We have a timeline, key features, so you can see these key features that we are talking about, cultural impact, and reflection questions. Along with that, on the Gateway, we have Mall Moments, which tells the story of the National Mall. Cherry Tree Rebellion is one of the stories that we're featuring. We have ones about squirrels and all the different, the FDR Memorial that we talked about, the airmail marker, some lesser known stories. We also have walking tours where they are pre-built tours that you could walk around the National Mall physically or virtually. And then we also have educational activities for teachers and students to be able to do in their classroom and on site. I can't really express my enthusiasm and excitement for the fact that students can be on this site right now. It's been a long journey for all of us, and we're so grateful for it. There'll be more webinars coming up for here and for teachers. So we'll be able to teach you all how to use it and how to integrate into your classroom. So if you go to the site, you can also click around there. And if there's any questions, feel free to use the contact form, and we would love to talk with you all, do demos for your classes or anything else you need. Thank you so much.
I'm kind of excited to click on the National Mall squirrels. See what happens there. Yes, we definitely have a lot of squirrels hanging out in the park.
The squirrels of DC.
I love
That's
it.
so great.
Before we leave you, does anybody have any questions about anything that you learned, about the Gateway, about National Mall squirrels?
They're mean. They're meaner than they look. I think we should applaud the fact that we got through in the time allotted, which is
I
pretty
know.
unusual for us.
Yes, usually we go way over. See, I
Yeah,
even
we
cut it a
tend
little
to.
short for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, well, thank you all very much for joining us today. Please, if you have a question, throw it in or, let us know. And hope you'll have a chance to get out and explore the Gateway and be able to, yeah, to explore around a little bit. 4th of July, that's fun. Beautiful pictures of them all. And yeah, in the chat, you see that we've been doing these programs for a while, and maybe you've missed a few and want to catch up. I don't know how good we are recorded, but feel free to check out the library of programs. Um, oh wow, Mrs. Peterson's class is excited to explore the Gateway. They thought this was really cool. So yay, Bobby's very excited. Thank you for sharing. And we hope to see you all on another program. Please let us know if you need anything else or if there's anything else we can help with. Thank you, Bethany, for all your creativity and graphics. And thank you, Trust, for hosting us and providing us with this gateway tool that allows us to, share them all with more people in different ways. So with that, I think 2 minutes to spare. Thank you all very much. We'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, everybody.